Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Hi, this is Alex Stein, co-host of Mushing Radio on Dog Works Radio. We just completed our first storytelling season on the 1925 Serum Run. Almost 100 years later, the 1925 Serum Run is something that is still inspirational, amazing, and in many ways larger than life. We've gathered all of these episodes together on one page to make it easier for you to listen to them in order. Just go to dogworksradio.com/serumrun. That's SERUMRUN, no space, dogworksradio.com/serumrun. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to Dogworks Radio at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you go to listen to podcasts.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michelle Forto, the morning podcast on Dogworks Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog, available on Dogworks Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto and you are listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Matsu Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. You can also subscribe to our show by going to Apple Podcasts or any other place you listen to shows such as Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, even iHeartRadio on your smartphone. And you can also find us over on social media. We can be found searching for Dogworks Radio. And today I am joined by our co-host. His name is Alex Stein, and he is at Coldfoot Films. And if you do follow him on Twitter, you're about to have your Twitter feed blown up with this year's Iditarod. Alex, how's it going?
It's going great, Robert. I have a friend who is not that much of a fan of dog mushing, who always tells me that this is the time of year when he just realizes that he's not going to understand anything on my Twitter feed for the next 2 weeks.
Well, I know Facebook has a way where you can mute somebody for 30 days. I don't know if they have that on Twitter, but I saw something just before we recorded this episode. You posted something on Twitter where it said that I guess it was Twitter sent you a message saying that they sometimes follow you on Iditarod or vice versa. What was that all about?
Oh, so there is a Twitter account for the Iditarod Trail. And last night I got this notification that just said, Iditarod Trail follows you. And I thought that's appropriate since I've been following the Iditarod Trail for a long time, that now the Iditarod Trail is following me.
Before we jump into today's topic, and we're going to continue our series about things that we do to get ready or prepare for races, and as you may have listened to, we talked about sort of the gear for the dogs and the gear in the sled, and today we're going to talk about feeding both people and dogs on the trail. But before we do, I know that Twitter is becoming a much more resounding source for information in terms of Iditarod. And I know that there's a very active person on Twitter for sled dogs, our friend Blair Braverman, who has been on the show before and ran the Bear Grease and the Canadian Challenge and is hoping to run the Iditarod in a couple of years. Man, she's got a heck of an internet following over there on Twitter, doesn't she?
Yeah, that's at Quince Mountain, and they're kennel partners with Blair Braverman, and Blair I think has been on Mushing Radio as well, and wrote a great book about her being exposed to mushing and her early mushing career and learning how to run dogs, which is very highly recommended. I think it is called something like Welcome to the Goddamn Ice Cube,
Yes.
is the title.
Yes, and
Um,
she has been on the
uh,
show, and we'll definitely link over to that on this episode as well, so folks can listen. But I guess the question I was going to ask you, Alex, is I know you're very active on Twitter during the couple of weeks of Iditarod coverage. Do you find that sort of your go-to place to post comments and to interact, or are you finding someplace else like Facebook or other social media places, including maybe even the Iditarod site, on where you're getting a lot of your information and sort of commentary back and forth?
I found that there are a bunch of groups on Facebook that are very, very active about sled dog racing. Our friend Helen Hegener runs a couple of them, and she's very, very good about posting lots and lots of articles that are really useful. Um, and at the same time, I find some of my go-to sites are searching Alaska Public Radio, ADN.com, KNOM has a lot of good mushing stories. It used to be that the Anchorage Daily News would have an entire separate Iditarod section every day, starting, just right before the race and going up until the end of it. And they still do a lot of coverage, but it seems like there's just a lot less of it than there used to be. But then again, there seems to be a lot less coverage in most newspapers than there used to be 10 or 12 years ago.
And up here in Alaska, the sort of go-to source in terms of television is KTVA, which is the CBS affiliate, and I believe it's ktva.com is where you can find that. Of course, you can find out all sorts of information by listening to our show. And then they have the Iditarod Insider, and I was reading an article earlier today that said about 20,000 people sign up for the Iditarod Insider. Could you mention what that is all about for folks that may become new to mushing? Maybe they just started listening to our show this year, and they're really trying to figure out a way to follow the race. What is the Iditarod Insider? How much does it cost, and what do you get for that cost?
So there are two parts to the Insider. There's the GPS tracking, which I believe you can get it separately, or you can get it with a larger Insider package. And then there is Insider Video. And the Insider has a team that goes out on the trail. They do a lot of interviews. They do a lot of stories at checkpoints. And they do some commentary. And that is, I believe, if you buy either one of them separately, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $20, or you can get them together for about $30. And the video is then available in a library, and you can look at it anytime. The thing that always bothers me about the Iditarod Insider is it used to be that you would get a year's worth of access when you signed up. So if you sign up in late February or the beginning of March, you would be able to look at the video till the next year in February or the beginning of March. But they changed it a few years ago. So now all of the subscriptions go until June. So, you can still watch things in the library until June, but then after June, if you want to watch the Insider videos, you have to re-up for the next year. So, and I always end up thinking to myself, oh, is this really worth it? And then at the end, right before or right as the race is beginning, I always say, yeah, I really need this. And I really need to be able to get my GPS fix in the middle of the night. So I always sign up for it.
And the Iditarod year starts in June. That's when they have their sign up at the picnic, the annual picnic there at the end of June. So I think that's why they do that. Alex, I've never signed up for the Iditarod Insider. I always catch just the clips that I see on other people's pages and that sort of thing. What is the video quality like? I mean, what are you seeing? Are you seeing interviews? Are you seeing sort of backstories like you would on the Olympics, where you see the events and you see, interviews that people have done well in advance? Or are you just seeing, people coming in the middle of the night to a checkpoint and, just sort of seeing people in the dark lit up by headlights?
It's a big mixture of everything, and usually what they do is they'll have videos of people coming into checkpoints, and sometimes they'll answer questions, and sometimes they won't, and then you'll also have um, a lot of videos where people are resting in checkpoints, where the insider crew will come over and talk to them and ask them specific questions about their runs or about various of their dogs or about things that have happened on the trail. It's it is it's really fascinating, and for people who are kind of Iditarod completists, it's absolutely essential. I find personally, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I find personally that about 20 to 25% of the videos are really amazing, and then there's a large percentage that I could sort of take or leave. But the other nice thing is they always have video of the each team starting and each team finishing. So that can sort of be nice to watch. And I particularly love watching the videos of people finishing, because usually, especially if it's someone who's younger or someone who it's their rookie year, there is so much joy and so much happiness when they cross under the Burled Arch.
So I'm picturing a guy or gal that hasn't slept in 3 or 4 days. He gets woken up by the local video crew, and the next thing you know, he's stirred from his sleep, and he has a bottle of Gatorade in one hand, and a hat from his main sponsor on, and of course a pair of sunglasses from its other sponsor. And he says, "I would like to thank, this company and that company." Does that happen even 5 days into the race, or is it purely just oh my goodness, I haven't slept in 5 days, but the dogs look great?
There's much less of that than you would think. And as the race goes on and people get more and more tired, their answers become much more honest. And the things that maybe if they thought about them, they wouldn't say, they just blurt them out. So it's kind of a wonderful way to get a glimpse into what people are really thinking for the most part. And there are some people who are very, very media savvy who still are aware that they want to be putting out a particular story, and they're very keen on sticking to whatever the story is they want to put across.
Right.
But for the most part, people are pretty honest, and it's a really great view into how things are going and what people are thinking.
And I guess to sort of sum up how folks follow the Iditarod, sort of the other half live by flying along the trail, where they'll stop in the checkpoints and they'll fly into the lodges, or they'll ride a snow machine on the trail and really get an in-depth, hands-on type experience, which is not cheap by any standards, is it, Alex? I know that you've done that a couple of times, where you've flown out to a couple of the more remote checkpoints. And of course, you've been into Nome a couple of times, I believe, to see the finish. So what is that experience like, where you're going, kind of hopscotching down the trail, either on small planes or even on Alaska Air or whatever? What is that experience like compared to sort of the armchair experience that most of us experience?
Well, for one thing, it's great. It's just you can really, really get very, very close to where everything is happening. And even at checkpoints that are relatively accessible, like Unalakleet or McGrath, there just aren't a lot of people who come there. So, in Anchorage, there might be 20,000 people who watch the ceremonial start. In Willow, there might be 4,000 or 5,000 who watch the restart. But you go to a place like McGrath, and you're talking about maybe 100 people who go out there, maybe less than that at any given time. And so it's a really special experience. You get to really see how things are run and talk to the volunteers and the checkers and the vets and the vet techs, and you get a very clear sense of the race that you don't get in other places. There's also, in addition to the things that you mentioned, one of the Seavies, one of Dallas's brothers, also runs this this Iditarod tour where they have people going on, I think mostly on snow machines, who follow the trail, and it's they're doing it again this year. I think they've done it for a couple of years, and they camp in various places and go to the checkpoints and follow the race. And I forget exactly how much it is, but I remember being shocked at how expensive it was to do something like that, even though I know that everything's expensive when you're traveling around Iditarod. But this was shocking to me how expensive it was.
And I believe that is the event that you're talking about is similar to what they did last year, where they have folks mush dogs for a couple of days here on the local trails, and they fly out to, I believe it's Unacleat or White Mountain or something like that. Then, of course, they finish up in Nome. I think it's about $10,000, which, if you're thinking about a once-in-a-lifetime vacation, that's not too terribly expensive. If you take sort of an all-expenses-paid trip to Hawaii, you can easily spend $10,000 in a couple of weeks staying at the fancy hotels. I guess it really just depends on what you want out of your vacation and what you want out of your experience. But yeah, $10,000 is a heck of a lot of money, but if it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, I think it will be well worth it.
Yeah. So I think we should roll into
Yes.
today's topic, which is part of our, what I sort of think of as our unofficial Ask the Musher series. So we're going to talk today a little bit more about what people and dogs eat out on the trail. And I know that there's some terms that I've heard a lot and that a lot of people might be familiar with. The first one is people talk about snacking dogs. So when you stop and give the dogs a little snack, but it's not a full rest. What sort of things do you tend to snack your dogs with?
Almost always we are using salmon steaks for, just like you would eat in a restaurant, a steak of salmon, and it's typically probably about a fist-sized piece, a good piece of salmon that's frozen, and we give that in our kennel about every 2 hours out on the trail. And you're right, it's just a quick snack. Pretty much we're stopping along the trail, we're dropping our snow hooks, grabbing the snack bag, walking up to the leaders, throwing them a piece of fish, and by the time we get to the wheel dogs, we're back on the sled and heading down the trail again. And we're doing that not only for calorie boost, but also for hydration. It's a great way to get hydration on a trail by using that frozen fish.
And so it's small enough so that it can be frozen, but they can still chew on it or break pieces off and swallow it, right?
Yeah. Like I said, it's probably the size of your palm. If you're holding it in your hand, it would be about that size of salmon. And like I said, it's just that steak. So if you took and we use a bandsaw. So if you use your bandsaw and you just cut the salmon from head to toe, you're just kind of cutting them in slices about the width of a Snicker bar.
And when you stop and you have a more time that you're stopped, what do you feed the dogs then?
That is sort of a secret among mushers, and everybody has their own different sort of recipe. Sort of the go-to recipe is a very high caliber kibble, much different than you would feed your pet dogs. A lot of folks feed kibble like Red Paw or something like that. A really what we call rocket fuel type kibble, and then we're mixing that typically with some type of beef, fish, chicken mixture in there, kind of making it up into a soup. And I call it gruel. It looks like a really thick beef stew by the time it's all stirred up and ready to go. And then, of course, people are adding supplements like fish oil and egg supplements and all sorts of other things to get those extra calories. And it's one of those things where a dog can easily eat up to 10,000, 12,000 calories a day, and it's typically how much fat and protein you're adding into that gruel or soup that you're going to feed a couple or 3 or 4 times a day, depending on your race schedule.
I was going to ask, what's the protein and fat mixture?
On the kibble or on the meat itself?
I guess on the overall gruel, like is there a a target that you want to have 40% protein or
That that
something like that?
that's a pretty good number, I guess. The kibble itself is typically well above 30 protein and 20% fat, so that's a very good kibble to feed your dog. Something that's above that, and then you're adding in a beef mixture, which has somewhat fat. It's typically like a ground beef or a hamburger type beef that you're adding, and then a lot of folks will add in their fats by using chicken skins and that sort of thing to give a really high fat content, and it's very similar to how we would feed ourselves out on the trail in terms of calorie requirements and in terms of distances and all that. So that's where that secret mixture comes in, and that really depends on the amount of time you're going to be running, how much rest you're going to get, how long you're going to be in the checkpoints. All those sorts of things are going to determine that mixture.
Right. And so when you have the kibble that and you mix in the other stuff, is the meat and the fats that you're adding, is that generally frozen and you add hot water to it?
Yes, that's what we use our cooker for. We talked about that a couple of shows back, and you can find that episode right here in our feed. We use that cooker mechanism to heat water to not quite to boiling, but definitely a pretty hot temperature, and then we add that into a small camp cooler, very similar to what you would take on a road trip that holds about 10 or 12 cans of soda, about that size of a cooler, and then we pour all of the meat and kibble mixture in there, and it is typically frozen, and then we'll add that pot of water, and as I mentioned, it's about the size of a pot that you would use to make your family's spaghetti, so that size of pot, and then we're adding the water into it, letting it sit for a while to melt all of that frozen meat and fat, and then we give it a good stir, and that's what we're feeding the dogs.
Now, I know that mushers have different things that they like to eat when they're out on the trail, and you've mentioned in the past that you like to have protein bars and I think maybe Snickers bars or something like that. But what's a good thing for mushers to be eating when they're out on a longer race?
You see over and over and over the number one go-to snack seems to be candied bacon. And if you've never had it, it's absolutely wonderful. It is pretty much just bacon covered in brown sugar and baked in your oven till it's crisp, and then you roll it into brown sugar again. Just think about that, Alex. It's probably not something you're going to have for breakfast, but it's definitely a really nice pick-me-up on the trail, especially if it's been 4 or 5 days. And if you're ever doing things in the elements, in particular in cold weather, it's very difficult to eat. Your body is doing things where it's saying, you know what, I'm not really hungry, I'm just going to press on. So things like that, high sugar, high fat, high protein type snacks are best. Some of the things that are sort of my go-to snacks are beef jerky. I really like to take beef jerky. I'll just put a bag in my parka pocket and just grab a piece and chew on it for a while. Hard candies are great. It not only keeps you awake if you're dozing off, if you suck on a lifesaver or something like that for a while, it gives you a little bit of sugar, but also kind of keeps you doing something. Pop-Tarts are nice. I know these are all foods that people are saying, ooh, you're supposed to be an athlete, why are you eating these? But again, you're looking for that really high flavor, high fat, high protein type food to go to. Some other things, I guess, would be frozen grapes are really good. 5-Hour Energies by far are a snack and or a supplement that a lot of mushers use. You will see them shooting those 5-Hour Energies like they do coffee. And then, just whatever you can have that fits in your pocket, because you cannot stop every 2 or 3 hours to grab a snack out of your sled bag and that sort of thing. You're eating on the go.
And I know that especially in Iditarod, some of the checkpoints are kind of famous for some of the foods that they have there. I think Takatna is known as the place where they have pies, and there are, other checkpoints that have special things that they like. But I've also heard stories about, mushers going into a checkpoint and eating just half a stick of butter
Right.
because they're craving fat. Is there a good way to balance sort of the sugar versus protein intake when you're out on the trail?
And as I mentioned, I think butter is a tough one to sort of stomach down, but something like that candied bacon fits that niche pretty good. And you had mentioned that the food in the checkpoints. Yeah, some places is very good. I know the place there in Uniclete for their pizza is astounding, and often at some of the bigger races and their checkpoints. The checkpoints will make spaghetti and chili and burgers and all that sort of stuff. But most of the time on the trail, we have to prepare our own meals, and we're doing this well in advance. I mean, this is definitely something that is occurring during the off season, and we're freezing that so we can put it in our drop bags. And some of my go-to favorites are mac and cheese. That I'll put in freezer type bags, where you're removing all of the air from that those vacuum sealers. I love to take slices of pizza. So leftover pizza, I will stick in the vacuum packs. Other soups and chilies and stews and that sort of thing work really well. And something that I haven't tried, but I would really like to try on my next race is cheesecake, where folks will just freeze up small pieces of cheesecake and put it in a vacuum pack, and then when they're ready to have a really nice meal or dessert, they can crack that open and have a nice piece of cheesecake. And what I found over the years is every musher loves to have little surprises, whether it's their wife's, little goodies that they pack in their bags, or a lot of times you will see some of the mushers fans. I know Allie and Alan are famous for this, where they'll have their fans send in little snacks and goodies that they'll kind of sneak in their drop bags, so they don't know what's going to be there when they get there. Then all of a sudden they open it up and they have a meal that was cooked by somebody in Wisconsin, and and they get that special little treat because mac and cheese and pizza may be getting a little old. And then of course there are people that do little things for themselves on the trail. I know on the last Serum Run, we talked about that a couple of episodes ago as well. On the last Serum Run expedition, the musher coordinator snuck in, I think it was 20 cheeseburgers from McDonald's, and they snuck them into the drop bags. And I think when they got to White Mountain, if I'm remembering correctly, she thawed out the cheeseburgers and gave everybody a McDonald's cheeseburger as a treat. And I remember her saying that was the highlight of the trip was, after 2 weeks on the trail, all of a sudden you get to munch on a McDonald's cheeseburger, something that most people would kind of find, ooh, I don't like eating McDonald's. But when you've been eating the same thing week after week, a cheeseburger from McDonald's sounds pretty tasty.
How do you heat up these things? Like how would you heat up mac and cheese
you would use
that you brought with you?
You would use the same cooker method that you would use for making the dog food. And remember, when you're using your cooker and that pot, which I said was about the size of a spaghetti pasta pot, all that you're cooking in there or all that you're making in there is hot water. So typically it's relatively clean, and these are already in those vacuum sealed type packages. So we just drop it in the water to heat it up. And even if you've been on the trail for 4 or 5 days, even that soggy piece of pizza that's been frozen for 2 weeks, it still tastes pretty good compared to eating Snickers bars and beef jerky for the last week or so.
I think that probably most of the people listening will share my experience, which is that now I am suddenly very, very hungry.
There you go. Well, definitely make up some of that candied bacon. And when you think about what you would eat over the span of 2 weeks and being able to plan for that many months in advance, most people are doing this in the off season. Like they'll be cooking it up and freezing it up in June or July of what they're going to eat on the Iditarod Trail the following March, and making up recipes and what they're going to have along the way. It's a very detailed and in-depth type procedure, and it's something that cannot be taken lightly, because that is your fuel, not only for yourself but also your dog teams. And if you forget that, you're going to have a problem. And one last thing I would like to mention on this, Alex, before we go, is what happens to all the food if you do not eat it, or if you scratch or something of the effect, which happens quite a bit on Iditarod. Almost always, all of that food and perishable type material stays in the villages, which is a great component of races like Iditarod, because all of that kibble, all of that meat, all of those supplements, even those pieces of cheesecake and pizza often stay in the checkpoints. And often you will find not only the villagers that have the ability to work and eat in some of that good taste in food, but often you will find other mushers that come through will be able to eat some of the leftover food that if Musher X scratched and he's no longer in the race, there might be a raid on his food stash for the other mushers that are coming behind him.
Right. And I believe that's also true with the dog food that's sent in the drop bags. Generally, the food stays in the villages, but any personal items will be returned to the musher.
Right. Yes, that's what I was saying. All of that dog food also stays. So all of that kibble and all that meat and all that goes back to the folks in the villages. Of course, they have dogs as well, and that's a nice little treat for those dogs as well. But yes, all of that personal type gear, so all of the batteries and sled runners and booties and extra hats and gloves and all that, typically all of that comes back and is well secure by the folks in the checkpoints, and it comes back to the Iditarod headquarters, or may even go to Fairbanks as well. And then well after the race, the mushers can pick that up and make sure that they have all their stuff returned. And that also includes the extra sleds. If you send out a sled, or even if one of your sled breaks along the trail and you have that extra sled at Unacleat or McGrath or whatever, that second or third sled is also returned to you after the race.
Excellent.
Any other questions you have on our feeding systems on the trail, Alex?
I think you've covered it really, really well. And I think that gives everyone a very, very good overview of what it's like in there. So this has been really wonderful. And thank you for taking the time to go through all of this with us.
Thank you very much. And again, folks, check out our other episodes where we talked about mushers gear and also the gear for the dogs. You can find those by searching dogworksradio.com, and you can also find those episodes over on Apple Podcasts. Alex, it's been a pleasure. We'll talk again soon, okay?
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. On behalf of my co-host, Alex Stein, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our DogWorks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about DogWorks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
DogWorks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. DogWorks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska Dog Works at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea, or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.